ADHD and mental health expert Dr. Robb Mapou sets us straight. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the focus group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the focus group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. You heard in our opening, we've got mental health expert Dr. Robb Mapou, who's a longtime listener of the show. And John and I, probably a month or so ago, did a story about doom piles and whether it's related to ADHD. And Dr. Robb is a neurodevelopment disorder specialist, particularly with adolescent and young adults. So he had heard the show and wanted to come on and talk to us a little bit about the article and set us straight on a few things. So that's later on during our Shop Talk segment. And so that's what that was about, Mr. Nash.
Hey, on the doom pile front, I want to bring up something. That show had a lot of people commenting in interesting ways. So we heard from one of our listeners named Dennys, who picked up on a part of the conversation that Tim and I had about the shredding doom pile. So if you have a home shredder and you do the thing where what we do is you start stacking the paper on top of the shredder that's meant to be shred. And then later on, you just have this enormous pile, and you're like, what am I going to do with it? Do I want to sit here and shred it all, or do I just throw it away? He actually sent a note about a thing that changed his life. He said it's an Amazon item, and it's a self-inking roller that you use to black out sensitive data on things that you can just then throw away into the normal recycling bin. So I think the thing is called, let me tell you what it is here. It's called the Guard Your ID Advanced 2.0 Roller, and literally you roll it over like your name or your address or something, right, and it puts down nonsense stuff that garbles everything up, and it's an ink-based thing. I just thought that was brilliant, so I just wanted to share that.
Can you use a Sharpie?
I suppose you could. The beautiful thing about this item here, sell it for a 3-pack. It comes for $21. I don't know how long it lasts for, right, but the roller is really wide. So you just, you go right over something. And he said, if your shred piles are getting to you, give this a try. I think you'll love it. Just roll over the name, account number, and then throw the sheet in the trash. The sensitive information is blocked, which brings up a whole other thing. I say this to Bob sometimes, like, who's really dumpster diving for our Con Ed bill?
Right.
That's one thing I'm just going to say.
I can't even log onto my bank account. How's somebody else going to do it?
You did the password. You sent a text for this. So thank you to our listener for mentioning he got a pair of socks, by the way. I already sent those out.
What's it called? It's an Amazon roller.
It's called
it's like a blackout pen or something, right?
It's called the Guard Your ID Advanced 2.0 Roller 3-pack. I could send you the link, Tim. Maybe we could put it in our
put it on the Facebook.
Put our show, yeah. And it just, so you have two options now. You could shred maybe your bank statements and your equities accounts and all that stuff, and then maybe for simple stuff, go in the trash. It just is another thing to do, right? Speaking of Bob,
go ahead.
Quick one. We had our neighbor Barbara over last week. I made beef stew in the slow cooker, and I was making lime key pie. And by the way, folks, you heard that right. It's key lime pie, but the recipe we use is from Tim's grandmother, who called it lime key pie.
Lime key pie.
I've decided there's never too many limes. That flavor is just great, so I put 6 limes in. And so I'm mixing this up in the kitchen, and Bob comes in, and he had his reading glasses on, and he stares at the mixing bowl. And it reminded me of when a dog sits next to you and they're being very polite, but you're eating and they're staring very intently, not at you, but at the food. So he's staring at the mixing bowl and staring, and I'm going slow, because it's a cream cheese base with that sweet condensed milk, and the cream cheese gets lumpy, right? So you have to keep mixing it. Finally, I put the mixer down and I take a spatula and I go around the side of the bowl, and then I just take my hands off. And I said, you're clearly fixated on this to go to town. He puts that thing in, and he puts the mixer on high, which, Tim, I think you've said you got to really whip this. And he got every single lump out. It was the creamiest, most like chiffon-like.
Full of air.
Then he finished mixing. He goes, okay. And I said, no. You could pour it into the pie crust. He starts pouring it in, and he stops because he thinks it's going to be too much. I said, Tim already told you, if you listen to the show, that it will fill the crust. Don't worry about it. So when we had our neighbor over, Barbara, she said the pie was fantastic. She loved it. We did your idea of a whipped cream on top. And I said, here's the real story of the pie. And I told her about Bob staring at the bowl like a dog stares at food.
That's
and
funny.
she just laughed and laughed. Anyway, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No. I saw this business story. It probably could have been on our on TFG Unbuttoned. But so the goldfish, which is the little cracker goldfish that everybody's very popular. They just got a new ad agency, and I guess one of the reasons they'd won is they were trying to expand goldfish and the brand beyond just because a lot of kids eat them and a lot of kids like them, but they say adults like them as well. So this popped up, and I just kind of cocked my head. So they've decided that the fish-shaped cracker brand wants to appeal to adults. So it's changing its name for the first time ever to Chilean sea bass. So instead of goldfish, the label is Chilean sea bass crackers. And it's the same cheddar snack, but just a different temporary name. And they're doing this because they want to appeal more to adults and thought this would be a playful nod to put on the iconic fish. So you can purchase these Chilean sea bass crackers. Only 2 packs a person. I can't believe those people are going to be busting the doors down. But only online through October 30th. And you got to go to ChileanSeaBassCrackers.com. And the bags sell for $7.38. You can still buy regular goldfish as well. But then they have a new logo and everything. But I guess I never thought about it. We just always knew what goldfish were. If I saw something that said Chilean sea bass, I would stay away like the plague on a cracker, wouldn't you?
Tim, as you were laying out this story, all that keeps running through my mind is why mess
with it
with perfection? Yeah. It's the goldfish. And I eat them as adult. I mean, if I'm around a kid and they have a little cup of goldfish, they always share, and I never say no.
Yeah.
But Chilean sea bass, I mean, you have to actually like Chilean sea bass to think that's kind of fun, right?
And why all of a sudden an adult would decide I'm going to buy the bag? I think it's just to get attention. Obviously, it's to get attention.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then they talked about a couple of other companies that have done this. They talked about Campbell Soup dropping the name Soup. I don't think it's the same thing. They talked about Mountain Dew redesigned their logo, so they're actually now spelling out Mountain Dew instead of just using MTN Dew. And Kraft Macaroni and Cheese has shortened their name to just Kraft Mac and Cheese. And they talked about IHOP, which became IHOB, because they wanted people to eat breakfast there more than just pancakes. But if you're going to the International House of Pancakes, you're going there for pancakes.
Yeah. End of story. Yeah.
So if I want goldfish, I'm going to buy goldfish. I don't know. I guess a lot of these companies need to figure out ways to attract more people or get more people to buy products. So that's...
But you're messing with an iconic brand.
Yeah.
It's been in movies and TV shows. And I mean, it's like, how much more recognizable do you want it to be? Hey, you know how this works, Tim. A new director of marketing comes in. We're going to change the world.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. like the one we know that decided to tell FedEx that it should get rid of when it absolutely positively needs to be there.
Yeah, classic example of a line that, hey, before we move on, quick one for you. I saw this meme. It's a picture, and it's a poster on a wall, and in capital letters at the top, it says employee attitude. That's the theme of the poster. And then the text says beneath it, staff need to stop, underlined, acting like they don't want to be here. And underneath that, there's a little pink Post-it notes, and it says in handwriting, we're not acting, staff.
People don't like getting back in the office, John.
Well, or if they hate the company, they hate the company. Please don't, go there.
So, Mr. Nash, what caught your eye this week?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
All right, so I'm going to just confess right off the bat that I really don't understand a lot about cryptocurrencies or Bitcoins or the mining of a Bitcoin because it's coming off a computer and it uses all this energy and it takes forever to make one coin. I'm not even going to pretend that I want to care about it until it becomes something that we have to care about. But this story comes to us from, I believe it's England, and there's a gentleman who is fighting his local town for the right to search the dump to find a hard drive that he threw away. And so I thought this happened like yesterday, right? But no. Okay, so here it is. And it's Newport. It's Newport, Wales, or Newport, England, because everything's in euros. But this guy named James Howells, 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 in 2013, he accidentally threw away a hard drive containing 7,500 Bitcoin, whatever that is, in the trash. But that currency, the 7,500 Bitcoin that he had today, is worth $500 million. Oh,
my God.
So for the past decade, because he did this in 2013, he has been lobbying the town, the Newport City Council, which has repeatedly denied his request to do this. He's been lobbying the town to go into the dump so he could search for his tossed out hard drive. He's made every effort to do this. He's promised the town a little bit of money. He actually has investors behind him, people who are putting up money to make this legal effort go forward because he's going to share the booty with them if he finds the drive. But here's the thing. If he finds the hard drive, which let's talk about a town dump and going in to search for an old hard drive, right? Let's say he finds the drive. He would be lucky if it wasn't corrupted and if it could actually boot up and he could get the Bitcoin off of there again, right? So there's that. But then, of course, the article says, he's put a lot of time and effort into this. I think he quit his job in IT. This is like a full-time effort for him.
God.
He claims that if Newport, the town of Newport, would allow him to get to the coin, to the drive, he would share the money. And Newport could then be like Dubai or Las Vegas because they could share in the money. I don't know how they get to be like Dubai and Las Vegas, but
500 million ain't going to get you there.
But someone said, if you worked for the past 10 years and just ignored the fact that you threw away something of value, you'd have, X a number of dollars. But the article then ends with, but then, of course, if you find it, you have half a billion or, whatever that is, $500 million.
So I guess there's no other record that he has this. See, that I'm with you. I don't understand Bitcoin or crypto or any of this stuff. It all seems to me to be funny money.
So, Tim, you are 100% correct in your question. I thought the same thing. Is there a backup? Is there? Does he have it on another drive? And it turns out that these
account or something, right?
Well, and it turns out
where's it housed? It's got to be housed somewhere. It just can't
it's
be housed on this.
On that his unique coin, which is encrypted, or I don't know what it is. It's on that drive. And this reminds me of a story of a gentleman about 2 years ago has been he lost the password to his crypto account. And he has 4 tries to break in or to get in. And he's exhausted 2 or 3 of them. And he's down to one last guess.
Oh, my
and
God.
He refuses to do it because the minute he does it, if it's the wrong password, but we all know, so let's say a decade ago, you opened up a Bitcoin thing for $10 or whatever the money was. And you used a password you use all the time or whatever. Then 10 years later, you forget about it. Nowadays, please send me a new password. I want to reset my password. You can't do that with this. So I don't know, Tim. Your question is a good one. Why? Like a bank has a record of your money. Right?
Yeah, no. The whole thing to me is just this whole Bitcoin and cryptocurrency to me is just. I hope it's like the laser disc. It just never catches on.
Or the Betamax too, right?
Betamax, right?
Yeah.
So
that was mine.
So mine is quite different. Do you remember that crazy fitness guru Susan Powter? Stop the insanity.
Yeah.
She had that short spiked hair, almost like Annie Lennox. Well, she had for years in the 90s. So she was the Stop the Insanity infomercial, which made her a fitness icon in the 90s. We saw her all over TV. Earned the company $50 million. Annually. And however, now she's surviving by delivering Grubhub. And she says bad business deals has left her financially struggling. She's been on Medicaid. She was living in an RV. She was living in a campground. She couldn't take care of her children. She's been delivering still with Grubhub to make ends meet. She was finally able to get Social Security, $1,500 a month, she said was a lifeline for her. And so she decided to write this memoir, and it's now the subject of an upcoming Jamie Lee Curtis documentary who had interest in it.
Wait, Tim, does that mean the picture that you sent me? So there's her, if you're watching on video, right. Tim sent two pictures. It's Susan with her fists in the air doing Stop the Insanity.
Yeah.
But below that is a picture from People magazine, and that's Jamie Lee Curtis, right?
No,
I bet that's Jamie Lee portraying her.
Oh, really? I thought it was still her.
Could be.
Because they haven't done... but you may be right. But they said Jamie Lee Curtis was the only one who really had interest in this. And I kept reading and reading. They did a Zoom call with her. This came out of People magazine. And they essentially asked her, she's 66 years old. She says, I still have my energy. She still looks good. She's still in shape. But people can't figure out, she said she made bad business deals, but she made over $50 million with this in products annually, they said she revealed to people for, number of years. But her deal with whoever her agents or managers were was 50-50. So that, fans would shell out these videotapes she did, the Stop the Insanity videotapes. I can't imagine. This is 1990s dollars, $79.80. And there were workouts and recipes and motivational cassettes and so forth. And she told her story about going from 260 pounds down to being this fit person. So they really said she was the first, Jamie Lee Curtis says she was really the first true influencer before we had any sort of social media. And what everybody is, and what I have seemed to be missing in this whole story, is that even if she had a 50-50 deal, and I'll say it's only $50 million instead of $200 million, but say it's $50 million, and she's got a 50-50 deal with her managers and her agents, that still leaves her with $25 million.
And even if you take taxes out of 25, that still leaves you with 12 or 14 million, which is a shitload of money.
Right. So I can't figure out how she lost all her money. And it doesn't say. It says in 2018, she said, my life really got scary as shit. She said, I was forced to move to a campground that I was living in with an RV in a very dangerous area of Las Vegas. She wasn't able to make rent. She began delivering Grubhub through Uber Eats, and she would make $80 a day, which she said helped her make rent. She said it was so hard, it was horrifyingly shocking, and I just couldn't make ends meet. It was killing me. She said now has 3 grown sons, and they've read her books and learned about her in the 90s, and they're kind of like, Mom, what happened? Where's the millions? And so she feels now that she's been wronged, and so she wants to make a comeback, and she wants to earn the money. She said not necessarily for herself, but for a cushion or for some sort of legacy for her children. So she says, I understand I'm not going to have the fitness empire I had 25 years ago, but I still want to write books. I still want to do this fitness guru sort of stuff she used to do and have a comeback. But to me, the whole point here, the story, and hopefully the documentary will touch on this when it comes out with Jamie Lee Curtis, is to what happened to the money. You hear about sports stars that do this with, you get a $100 million contract as an NFL player, and in 10 years they're broke.
Yeah.
Because they've made bad real estate investments. They have a huge entourage of people that usually hangers on. You're very generous to friends and family. And next thing you know, you're 32 years old, you're not playing professional ball anymore. And you have your whole life ahead of you. Right. But I can't figure out where the money went. She's blaming it on bad managers and investment folks. But
so either she was approached by people, or the crew around her introduced her to, if you put in 2 million, you're going to make 10 million. I don't know how I guess you and I just think differently, that if we walked into that kind of money, we know well enough that it doesn't happen every day, that if you put it away, it's going to do you a world of good. And if you want to treat your friends, take them on a vacation somewhere and call it a day.
Right.
I mean, how much would you have to spend to have your, This one, the thing about Susan Powter that was so funny, and everybody remembers this, she used to bring out on stage something like a gelatinous blob. Do you remember this? And it was like 10 pounds of fat. It was like this rubber. I don't know what it was, but it was like, it looked gross. That was her big shtick. Like, this is what's hanging on your body. And I remember my old business partner adored her, thought she was like, the harbinger of the new way of selling product. And when I read this article as well, because I came across it, I thought the same thing you did. Like, what decisions did you make that were so bad? I mean, because they had to be multi-million-dollar mistakes, right?
Yeah, she said she wasn't. She says here the funds were flowing in, but she goes, I guess it just wasn't trust that my money was being handled correctly. She said, I never checked balances. After she kind of got off the track, but the money was still coming in, she said it was a 50-50 split, but she had to declare bankruptcy in 95. And then she was given a talk show. I don't know if you remember that. That turned into complete crap. They said the talk show didn't work. So she decided she was going to throw it all away, and she went to Seattle, and she began teaching elementary school. And she was photographing underwater home births, you can imagine, driving an old Volkswagen Beetle, and essentially became a hippie. She said money was still flowing in. I guess I just didn't keep track of it.
This is...
She said, I had no property.
Even more shocking, right?
I didn't really know what I was getting paid, and then I have nothing left to take care of my children. And all the doors that were once open were now closed. And I thought, well, we all know what that is, right? Once the doors are closed, nobody wants you unless you got GW in your pocket, right, John?
George Washington. You need bucks in your pocket for people to talk to you.
Anyway, I find the whole thing. I'm curious to watch this documentary just because
I would watch it. And this brings up a memory. Was it Dolly Parton who said you have to be your own manager?
Yeah,
I think that very quickly she came to the realization in her career that if she wanted to be on top of things, she needed to be her own manager. And that's a businesswoman who knows what she's doing, right?
Well, Aretha Franklin was like that too. She learned early on she would go to different venues and play, and then she would never get paid.
Yeah.
And so that's why she famously would have her purse with her, whatever, and she wanted to be paid
Cash
before she went on. Even when she went to Subaru, she did an event for us.
Radio City, was
in
it?
In the early 2000s. No, this was in Chicago.
Okay.
She did a private event, but we had to have a cashier's check delivered to her room an hour before she came on stage. She wanted the coin.
Tim, I don't think I know that story because we saw her perform at Radio City for the Upfronts one year.
That VH1, the VH1 Divas. No, she was famous for I'm not going on till I get the check, and she stayed and she did that for her whole career.
Pay for play.
And, she's like, I'm not going to be ripped off again. I don't blame her.
No, and what a smart businesswoman. So this contrasts that with Susan Powter and everything you just read, where she wasn't really sure she was making money. Should I check the? Okay. Yeah. So here we have that. The before we get to our shop talk, we've got a little bit of a business birthday here this week, Mr. Nash.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
This is a quick one. Born October 30th in 1915, he died at 87 in 2002. The founder of Winchell's Donuts, Verne Winchell. I never heard of Winchell's Donuts. Have you?
No.
It's a California thing, which is why we wouldn't know it. Probably.
So when you look at, Tim, if you're watching video, Tim sent, sometimes he has a lot of difficulty finding a picture of the person. It doesn't happen too often, but this looks like a hard to find photo. But the Winchell's Donut House sign sort of reminds me of In-N-Out Burger or McDonald's.
Yeah. It's in California.
Okay.
So where that sign is. But so he was born in Bloomington, Illinois. Family moved to California when he was 9. He went to Pasadena City College, worked for General Motors for a little while, but wanted to be in his own business. So he had tried opening a jukebox business called Winchell Music. That didn't work. And then he went and tried to sell used cars with Winchell Motors, and that didn't work. So a friend of him, kind of on a whim, said, if you want to get in business, there's a high profit margin in donuts. So he took $27,000, all the money he had scraped together. This is in 1947. And turned a piece of commercial property into a donut shop, Winchell's Donuts, out in Tempe, Arizona. And it took off. he decided in the 60s to open more and more. He said not all of them seemed to work, but eventually the donut business caught on. And once the donuts took off and he started opening more and more of them, he became the second largest donut purveyor, I guess, in the country, but right behind Dunkin' Donuts. Although he was a distant second. They had about 170 outlets. He expanded throughout California, and then he went nationwide. And they said, although, as I said, the chain was second to Dunkin' Donuts. I'm sorry, it wasn't Tempe, Arizona. It was Temple City, California.
Temple City.
Where it opened in 1948. He earned the nickname the Donut King. And Dennys, the restaurant Dennys, was interested in him in 1967, and they ended up buying Winchell's Donuts. And they made Winchell the chairman of Dennys.
Interesting.
So
that's a very interesting path.
Right. So he sells the donuts sells the donut shop to Dennys. Dennys makes him chairman of the board and president and chief executive officer until 1980. So he was at Dennys for quite some time. He in 1984 he ended up selling out all his donut stock and his stock in Dennys for $600 million. Not too bad.
No.
So he was also a thoroughbred breeder, horse breeder, and they go through all these accolades of all these different horses he had. But I laughed. He had one horse he named Ronnie's Baby, which was bred by Ronald Reagan. And Desi Arnaz.
Oh boy, that's interesting, huh?
And he says, and then it just says the horse didn't amount to much. But then he said the best horse he ever bought, he paid $2,800 for a horse in 1989, and the horse over its career won $1.7 million for him.
Wow.
Besides horse racing, John, he loved movies like you did, or like you do. His favorite movie was Casablanca. Although he says you can't beat older versions of the movie Terminator and all the violence and sounds of the explosions. He died of cardiac arrest in Las Vegas, where he made his home in 2002 at the age of 87. He was a resident of Las Vegas for 30 years. When he was asked right before he died what he thought his success was, I laughed about this quote. He said, "The key to my success was careful management, good merchandising and advertising, and proper locations with quality products." Sounds like the 4 Ps. Product,
which
price,
never go out of style, right?
No, yeah. So currently, Winchell's Donuts is still around. They're mostly in 6 different Western states. Also internationally in Guam, Saipan, Saudi Arabia, and Japan.
Interesting foreign locales for Winchell's Donuts, right?
Yeah. So happy birthday to Verne Winchell.
I think he's great. And I bet horses were one of his real passions, like his hobby.
There was a lot written about the horse breeding and horse races, and his sons got into it, and
when you get bitten by the horse bug, man, we know many people who love horses, and the race caliber thoroughbred is a whole nother kettle of fish altogether. Yep. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to be welcoming Dr. Robb Mapou to the show. He's nationally recognized for his work on neurodevelopmental disorders in older adolescents and young adults. He's going to be talking to us about ADHD and a few misconceptions about that, because it pops up a lot in articles about, procrastination or doom piles we talked about earlier. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this break with Shop Talk.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Okay, welcome back to the Focus Group, folks. Tim Bennett and John Nash here. And as we promised before break, we had a conversation with Dr. Robb Mapou a few days ago, and we're going to go right to that conversation. So here we go. For Shop Talk today, joining us here on the Focus Group is Dr. Robb Mapou. He is nationally recognized for his work on neurodevelopmental disorders in older adolescents and young adults, specializing in assessment of learning disabilities, ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, memory problems, brain injuries, and neurological conditions in adolescence. He practices in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and Chevy Chase, Maryland. Robb, welcome to the show. And I think right before we started, you told me that you also have a new honorific as president of fill in the blank.
The Delaware Board of Examiners of Psychologists. It sounds more impressive than it is. But I do want to add, most of my focus is adults, not adolescents. These days, I see very few adolescents, although I've done that in the past.
All right, so we reached out to Robb. He's been a longtime listener of the show, and a couple of weeks ago we did this shop talk piece about doom piles. You know, this idea that people they just create piles of things and they add up after a while. They don't really want to deal with it. And the article kind of loosely associated this behavior with ADHD. And I don't know if they put OCD in there, because that would be the opposite, where you'd clean those piles away immediately if that was your particular thing. But so in general, do you want to just jump in and talk a little bit about what we're looking at when we talk about ADHD?
Sure. The first most important thing is that this is a developmental disorder. It is not something that suddenly pops up while you are an adult. So to diagnose ADHD, you have to demonstrate that these symptoms have been present since childhood, even if this was not diagnosed previously. It's not something that just starts as an adult. Some people have proposed adult onset ADHD, but the research does not support that. So it is a developmental disorder. That's the most important thing about it.
And the acronym actually stands for
attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There are three different types. Predominantly inattentive presentation, predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation, which you pretty much only see in little kids, and the combined presentation, which shows some persistence of those hyperactive impulsive issues, typically fidgeting and impulsivity, and not so much hyperactivity.
So in the article, Robb, they were talking about kind of how their thought was ADHD had correlation with these doom piles that John mentioned. And I was wondering, they danced around the issue of medication or medicating, and I know you have an opinion on that as well. And I was wondering, with ADHD, is it a behavioral thing that you can change behavior through therapy, or does it require medication in order to treat?
You really need both. The medication, for people who truly have ADHD, the medication essentially does two things. It helps you focus more effectively. And the way it helps you focus more effectively is that it makes things that are not fun, not reinforcing in the moment, more interesting, more fun, because it boosts up the dopamine levels. Dopamine has to do with the reward system of the brain. So if there's no reward for doing something, you're going to avoid it. At the same time, it doesn't build organizational strategies. It doesn't automatically make you able to organize that pile more effectively. For that, you need therapy, something called coaching. You need to build the behavioral strategies to be able to do that.
So when an adult comes to you, is it first, are they often referred, or does somebody one day say, I'm not achieving my goals, I'm not getting what I need to get done? Do they actually recognize that there is an impediment to their progress, and it could be behavioral?
It's a combination of both. Sometimes they get referrals from a psychotherapist, from a psychologist, from a primary care provider. At other times, people come in and believe they have ADHD because they're not getting things done, because they have trouble paying attention, and maybe because they have seen someone on TikTok or other form of social media say, oh, I have all of these problems. And they go, yeah, that's what I do. I must have ADHD. And that's always difficult because there are many different things that can cause problems with executive functioning. Those are the planning, organizational skills that we need to function in everyday life. Anything that affects the brain will affect those two functions. ADHD is just one of those.
Well, I think that's what triggered the message you sent us. You've been a listener for 16 years. I'll put myself out there and say, do you think John or I have ADHD? Because sometimes what we talked about here, and I think when you sent the note to us, is we procrastinate. We both are procrastinators in some aspect. And I thought, can we just be a procrastinator, or is that a form of ADHD, or what's your thought on that?
You can just be a procrastinator.
Okay.
I see you guys as very successful. You've been very self-directed for many years. You have your own business. Now, granted, there's some thoughts that people with ADHD may do better with their own business, but each of you, or at least you, Tim, have worked for an organization. And to me, to be as successful as you are, even if you procrastinate, it's unlikely you have ADHD. We also have so many distractions, especially electronic. I first got email in the 1990s when I was working with the military. And as the electronic distractions have grown, yeah, it's harder to get things done because things are pulling you in every direction. And sometimes the electronic stuff is more reinforcing than what you have to do.
You know, that is, Rob, that is so true. I find lately that to get some deeper work done, I have to literally pick myself up and go to the library.
Mm-hmm.
And the focus is my iPad, a pad of paper, and a pen. And you really can't escape it. And you're there for a couple hours. And I leave feeling so much that I've accomplished so much more because that external world has been sort of pushed to the side intentionally. When you work with your patients and your clients, is there must be some resistance to the idea of medication, or are people more receptive to that? Because I know that parents who deal with kids who have hyperactivity issues or attention ADHD issues, they make that decision very carefully because it's a child. Are adult decision-making processes the same when it comes to being medicated?
It's variable. Some people are very eager to get the pill that will fix everything. That's when I am more skeptical that that's actually the diagnosis. Other people say, I'm somewhat reluctant to go on medication. And my response is, that's fine. There are behavioral strategies that we can do, assuming that it is ADHD, but I see a little bit of both in that.
So you're down in Delaware. If somebody had wanted to speak with you, has your business changed in that now you will have somebody jump on a Zoom, or is there still laws about whether you could practice cross states or something? I mean, if somebody wanted to contact you, how does that work?
That's a whole other issue. There is something called SIPAC, which is a credential that you get, which allows you to perform virtual evaluations, virtual therapy with people in other states, as long as both states agree that you can do that. I do have that credential. I'm also licensed in Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and Hawaii. And most of my practice is in Delaware and Maryland. I don't like doing evaluations that require testing virtually. I will do some interviews virtually, and I will often do feedback virtually, especially if it's one of my patients in my Maryland practice.
Okay, why
Rob,
Hawaii? I'm sorry, John. So
no, go ahead, Tim. Why
you
Hawaii?
You had the Mid-Atlantic there, but are you Hawaiian? Why Hawaii?
No, I'm not Hawaiian, but I've been very immersed in Hawaiian culture since we first went there in 1998. And in the early 2010s, we considered moving there. I had a friend who was about 10 years older than me who had a practice, and he basically said, I'm going to retire one day. You could move out here and take over my practice. And so I got licensed. It was pretty straightforward because I'm board certified, and I've held the license ever since. We ultimately decided that the logistics of moving was too much, the expense, overseeing my mother's care. There were a whole bunch of reasons that we decided it wasn't feasible. And Delaware is certainly a lot more financially viable than Hawaii would be. But I'm still involved with that. I play Hawaiian music. Tim, as you know, I play the ukulele. They call it ukulele here. And I actually go there about once a year. A colleague of mine, though, has asked me if I would consider picking up some slack in her practice, where she's getting an abundance of referrals from the FAA, which I do. That's often undiagnosing ADHD and people who have had this cavalier diagnosis. So I may actually use my license after 10 years of having it.
Wow.
I want to hop back just a brief second to something you said that fascinates me about picking up on what Tim had asked about virtual sessions or working with people that might be out of state. You said that you don't have a problem doing some assessment virtually, but you would I'm guessing you would prefer in person. And is that because when you're sitting face to face with someone, you are trained to pick up very particular cues, behavioral cues?
That certainly is helpful, especially if you're working with someone with the possibility of ADHD and you can see, are they distractible? Are they constantly looking in other places while you're trying to talk with them? Or autism spectrum disorder, which I do a lot, you notice how they're interacting with you, the nonverbal cues, how they respond to that. I'm comfortable doing the interviews and the feedback that way, but there are hands-on tests that we do that may involve paper and pencil, may involve manipulating blocks. Those types of tests I prefer to do in person so that I can really watch what the person is doing. There is, though, a whole research area supporting the use of virtual testing. And there are a lot of people who are doing that, especially in rural areas where there are not a lot of neuropsychologists and people would have to travel a long distance. The pandemic really changed that. It caused people to look at the research on virtual testing, and a lot more people are doing it now than prior to the pandemic.
You mentioned autism, and I was having a conversation with somebody over the weekend, and I don't know if this is off topic, but I was under the impression that autism was more prevalent in males. Is that true?
That's absolutely correct. It is several
Okay.
times more prevalent in men than women. And I would be happy to come back and talk about that if you have a business article that looks at that. For example, a lot of tech companies are now specifically looking for folks who are really bright, have great math skills, have great tech skills, but are on the autism spectrum and are hiring them. So I don't know if you've come across that, but that might be an interesting topic to cover in the future.
No, I'm glad you said that because this person disagreed with me. And I just remember hearing and seeing something about it was more predominant in males. And I'm not sure they know why, do they?
Well, they believe it may have something to do with brain exposure to androgens, to testosterone in utero. That's been
Right.
linked to a lot of developmental disorders. When I was back in my internship, there was a whole theory linking that to dyslexia. That is a very specific type of reading disorder. So it does seem that that exposure may make you more vulnerable. And that's why we think all of these developmental disorders, not just autism, but ADHD, learning disabilities, are more prevalent in boys and men.
All right, before we let you go, and I want our listeners to, we really love this conversation, and you've demystified a great deal of things for me, but I want to just emphasize one thing, and I think you might agree with me. Don't self-diagnose. So if someone suspects something is going on, what are their first, second, and third steps if they think,
They,
okay, I have a problem?
they should seek out a psychologist or neuropsychologist like me who has a background in ADHD and understands that to make that diagnosis, you need to do a thorough review of their history from childhood to the current time, get access to academic records, especially elementary school records with the teacher comments in them, interview a parent. I insist on that for my cases. I want to talk to the parent about the early development and not just get a self-report. Look at any medical records that could indicate a medical condition or a medication that might be affecting attention and executive functioning, and consider all of the other possible disorders that can cause that. This includes depression. As the article mentioned, depression can cause problems with executive functioning, anxiety, just general stress. Poor sleep or insufficient sleep is a big one. We need, as adults, 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. We cannot get by on 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, even though people think they can. That will cause problems with attention and executive functioning during the day. The evaluator needs to consider all of these causes. And in the cases that I've seen where the diagnosis was incorrect, it was typically based on a self-report, on a rating scale that only the person completed, and failure to consider everything else that was going on in that person's life. In one case, I saw them write about all of these problems, but then they said it's ADHD, even though they don't have a developmental history. That's just poor practice.
Well, John will agree with you about the sleep. Martha Stewart won't, though. I think she says you only need 3 hours. So, hey, Rob, thanks for joining us here on the focus group. You're going to become our resident neuropsychologist, I guess we'll
Cool.
have to say.
I mean, it's a real treat to come on. I don't do this because I need business. I'm semi-retired. I actually don't do that many evaluations anymore. But I love talking about this and getting the science and good practice out there to people.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. And just in case somebody wants to look you up, I have your website as Dr. Robb Mapou. Did I say it right? Mapou? Mapou. So I messed it up. .com. So it's DRROBBMAPOU.com. And we'll also put that in the description of the show. So thanks again for joining us. We appreciate you contacting us and reaching out. And when we do find something about autism and the job market with business, we'll be sure to be back in touch. So
you're very welcome.
Thanks.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Big thanks to Dr. Robb Mapou for joining us here on the Focus Group. We have some of his information on our Facebook page if you want to get in contact with him. And he also gave us some info for how to reach him towards the end of the interview. So thanks for joining us here on the show. We want to remind everybody, because we see this all the time, please don't text and drive, arrive alive. And join us next week on the show when we have guest Kevin Downey coming in to talk about using email and other techniques for getting business leads, which is not always the easiest thing, as Tim and I will tell you. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you here next week.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.